The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Raygan Kelly, and I am joined this week by two very cool co-hosts.
Nate Eininger.
And Shane Kelly.
And this week we are talking about Monster Train. No, this is not our spooky season Halloween game. We're a little late for that, but this isn't really the Halloween-y sort of monsters. This is Monster Train, a deck-building roguelike about angels and demons, those sorts of monsters.
I think it fits right in. I think we're rounding out. We're sort of smoothing out of spooky season. We did a legit spooky game, for once this season. But we're here back with a monster game. If I had played this game earlier, this might have been my Halloween costume. It's like an entire monster train, which would have been awesome. But your face could be the pyre. It'd be awesome.
Sweet choo-choo train costume, buddy.
So we're a little late to the party on this. Monster Train is from a developer called Shiny Shoe. I am not familiar with them. But they came out with this game last year, May 21st of 2020. And we are talking about this here in the depths of 2021. It came out on Nintendo Switch more recently, but even that we're kind of late to the party. That came out in August with a kind of complete edition called Monster Train First Class. But this game, I think even though I think this did really, really well, I think it probably isn't too hard for folks to have missed this one if this isn't a genre that you specifically keep your ear to the ground about. We'll talk about the artwork in a little bit, but this is not a game that jumps off of a Steam page or even like a Twitter GIF at me. I am really surprised how much I enjoyed this game because I did not expect to love it based on its art style or even kind of its genre, which is a sort of hot and cold for me. But yeah, before we dive into talking specifically about Monster Train, because this is a deck building roguelike, a strategy deck building roguelike, and that is such a very specific genre space. Before we dive in and talk about this game specifically, it might be a good idea for us to just give a high level overview of what is a deck building roguelike and why is this a thing in 2021.
I'd love to get into that. The thing about deck building roguelikes is you can really draw a straight line to them from the thing that Raygan always groans when I bring it up on the podcast, which is Magic the Gathering. So just as Richard Garfield intended as he created Magic the Gathering, we have things have evolved, and I think that probably the biggest step in between would be deck building card games like Dominion, and then there's been a long lineage of those. But when you really start seeing this hit video games, there's a few, but everything combines well with roguelikes, I think. This is just kind of a truism in all video game genres now. The roguelike structure is just the way that a lot of genres try to bake in a little bit more replayability.
I would add, though, Shane, I agree with you that I think you can make almost any game a roguelike and it'd be fun. But deck building is particularly adept to roguelikes because part of the most fun of any deck building game, whether it be physical or on digital, is actually building the deck and iterating on your deck. And so being able to do it over and over and over and try different things makes the deck building format fit perfectly for roguelikes, where you may start over and play the game 150 different times. It's perfect. I think it's, I think Monster Train might be the most we're going to talk about this a lot in this episode. This might be the most extreme version of this mechanic. It's hard to imagine it getting any more complex than this.
It is highly experimental. You really do mess around a lot in this one. And I think that kind of experience of deck building, that is one of the huge elements of fun of any of these card games, because you're trying to build something that lets you capitalize on controlling for the randomness of drawing cards out of a deck full of random cards, which is why my favorite way to play Magic is to play a draft where you get to build the deck right then and there. But that is all I have to say about Magic. Sorry, Raygan. The genre of deck building roguelikes really doesn't.
By the way, I do not believe you that is all you have to say about Magic, and I'm just gonna make a sound every time you say Magic the Gathering on this episode. Okay,
yeah, fine. As long as that sound is a air horn to show how pumped you are. I think the first game that really I became aware of in the genre, it was Slay the Spire. But I do know that Hand of Fate was also really popular. It came out like the year before or 1 or 2 years before. But really, even that isn't all that far back. That's like 2015, 2017. And Slay the Spire did this really amazingly well. We on this show, for a podcast that's about short games, have covered a remarkable percentage of this overall genre, which is a massive time sink genre.
Especially considering that almost none of them actually qualify as short games if you come right down to it.
Well, let's hold on. Let's not jump to any, what we talk about is it's a game that respects your time, right? We are anti the games that are just like, doing the same thing over and over and over.
Unlike a roguelike.
Hold on, though. It is a unique experience every time, right? It's a unique experience that you are controlling, and any one run can, especially like Slay the Spire, this game's a little bit longer, even though it's also more condensed. We'll get into it, but it's Slay the Spire. Once you get good at it, like a run normally doesn't take more than an hour. So it's actually like, I still play Slay the Spire because it's the perfect kind of game for someone who doesn't have a ton of time to play video games. I can sit down, I can fire up Slay the Spire or whatever deck building roguelike, that I'm playing, and I can know that I'm going to have a complete experience in that one sitting, which you can't say about, the games that we tend to rail against, the like 100-hour experiences where it's like, 20% of it was cool and exciting, and then 80% of it was like kind of just doing the same thing over and over to get to that experience. So, but that's the same. We do this every time.
I've heard all of your rationalizations.
I know.
I'm hearing all of them since we did our FTL episode and like the first 5 episodes of the show, Nate.
The long-standing roguelike exception continues.
Yeah.
I'm not bitter. I like these games. Sure, they fit our format, Nate. Sure.
I wish you could all see that Raygan's doing this thing with his face right now, where he's like leaning in, and he's trying to be all coy and like, and it's not working. Okay, Raygan.
Look, okay, we keep doing these deck building roguelikes because Shane loves Magic the Gathering and likes roguelikes. Nate loves roguelikes and likes Magic the Gathering. And I'm just along for the ride, guys. I'm here. Like, I'm doing my best. All right.
Okay, but so in the last few years, we might have overdone it a little bit, but I think the industry as a whole has maybe overdone it. In 2019, we had Griftlands. In 2019, we had Dicey Dungeons. In 2019, in 2020, Monster Train, Signs of the Sojourner, and now 2021, Inscription, which I already have planned to play. I have started it for this show. So,
you know what? That sounds like we need more of these games, because that's like 1 or 2 a year. That's not enough. Get out there.
I feel like we need a short game spin-off or something for these.
Well, the perpetual game is what we have to call it, man, because these are not games that are meant to be played. Like, as short as the play sessions are, and with all of the caveats that Nate said, which, I agree with, but these are also easily classified as perpetual games. These are games that you are meant to play again and again, essentially forever. There are endings to this game, but you have to kind of decide for yourself when you're done with one of these. Unless you're an absolute god, and have all the time in the world, there's really no like actual end to a lot of these games. There's always a sort of Nate's smiling because he's the god. Because these are games that most normal people will play. Like, okay, here's my experience of deck building roguelikes. In typical fashion, I play these games for about 3 to 10 hours. And then I'm done with them. And I think that's actually probably not that far off for most people. If you look at the how long to beat on this, which is very hard to interpret for a game like this, like I don't know how people are actually recording their progress on there, but like they list the like completion at like 3 hours and like the like the basic like what do they call that? The versions of their playthroughs, like the basic playthrough
and completionist.
Yeah, the basic playthrough is like 3 hours, and the quote unquote completionist, like do everything, is something like 300 hours.
Yeah.
And so how much of any one of these types of games you play is really going to be up to you and how you engage with the game and the genre, whether it clicks with you, the mechanics click with you, etc.
Yeah.
So like, is this a short game? That depends on your brain mostly, not on the game.
And I think one quick I wanted to call out, Shane, when you were listing the games, do just want to give a shout out to the Meteor Fall games made by by friend of the show, Eric Ferrero. Those actually probably qualify best of all of these because they are deck building roguelikes that you also probably can get pretty close to 100%ing the game in like a reasonable amount of time, unlike a Slay the Spire or a Monster Train, which is truly going to like if you want to max out everything, it is for sure hundreds of hours. And I think that is part of why though these games have huge followings and they sell really well, but they don't often like have a lot of staying power. I mean, Slay the Spire is considered incredibly influential, right? But you don't see it still being played a lot other than in its tight-knit community. I think Monster Train at least was recommended to me about every 3 weeks for the last year and a half since it came out. But I think this game is so dense and so packed with like every single like I think this is the most systems heavy game that we've ever done. And unless you are like
very crunchy.
Yeah, unless you are like really into this thing, like you're not going to play it more than a handful of times because you can beat it pretty quickly. You might beat it on your first or second run and then you might say, well, that was fun, and then run it a few more times and then be done with it. Unlike myself, who I am somewhere around my 40th run on this game, and I'm all in on it. I love it. I think it's made for people like me and Shane, but it doesn't surprise me if a lot of people play this, 10 to 20 runs, win a good amount of them, and then go, I don't have the desire to pay attention as much as these games require. Like this game is so dense. It's impressive. It truly is. But I can see why this is a more niche game.
I agree with Nate in that it is a systems heavy and dense game. But like when I hear crunchy, dense game, lots of systems, really deep, I immediately start like backing away in some cases because like I start worrying that it's not going to be approachable. And especially when I'm familiar with this genre and have had experiences with games like Slay the Spire where I enjoyed that game, but it required me to bring a lot of myself to it. And it was not particularly interested in like making me feel smart or good as I was doing it or learning it. Whereas this game, like the number one thing that I think stands out to me about this game as opposed to almost any other game in the genre that I've touched is how much this game is constantly putting little rewards in front of you. It is constantly patting you on the back for your successes, and it's constantly dangling new and interesting little things in front of you. It also feels, while it's more complicated than Slay the Spire in some ways, it feels to me less complicated in some ways. I think if you objectively like wrote down all of the systems and mechanics in here, it probably is more complicated even than a very complex game like Slay the Spire. But I constantly felt like I was getting it, in a way that I didn't always, because I wasn't always on the verge of death. Right? It wasn't a constant scrabble for every inch, ending invariably with death. This game is very much more approachable. At least I think it's a lot more approachable in terms of the way that its mechanics and its like reward structure works. Like it made me feel like this is something I can do. More than any game like this I've played.
The thing that I really like here that is very different from some of the other games in this genre that I've played is that it feels very much more approachable. Like you said, it is very complicated in terms of just if you were to write out a rule book for it. But in general, it tends to err on the side of presenting you with like 2 or 3 fairly positive choices at a lot of these little decision points. And there's just not a ton of ways that you can make like a huge mistake at the level. In Slay the Spire, you can pick like the wrong direction on the map and be like kind of effed, or miss out on something really big that could get you a nice advantage. In this game, like it doesn't feel like there was a lot of wrong choices. And then on top of that, it does feel like this game really wants you to succeed. I got a faster kind of first successful run on this game than I did in any previous deck building roguelike. It was much less punishing in that way. And I think that's kind of an intent. I think it's really interesting to try to make a game like this, like where it's basically like, we know you're going to be replaying this. So why make the first successful run such an intense hurdle like so many of these do?
Like these games want you to stick around, and some games, I think Slay the Spire included, but tons of these types of games, the way they want you to stick around is like, you are motivated to win, right? Well, we're going to make sure it takes you 10, 12 hours to get your first win, right? Whereas this game is like, oh, you like this?
Like 3 hours.
Here, win one in the first hour. And it knows that there's other interesting stuff. It's got all of these clans and all these other mechanics.
And it's going to escalate the difficulty.
Yeah. So it's willing to let you win one in order to make you feel like like you can do it.
And there's a lot fewer fights between you and that ending.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to say is I think they do this in a number of ways. I completely agree, though I will say that like I think the first run on Slay the Spire wasn't dramatically different of a difficulty level than this one, but it get the ascension, the ascension,
buddy.
The ascension. So a lot of these games, every time you beat it, they like add a layer of difficulty. So the first one is inherently the easiest, and every run gets more and more difficult by adding. Now the enemies have +2 attack. Now they come in with more health. Now there's more of them. Whatever it may be, it stacks and it stacks. And this game very quickly gets a lot harder. So I do agree with you that like the first run is, I think, more understandable. Or more achievable to win very quickly. But this game is not a like easier game in that regard. It gets very complicated very fast. And I also want to say, when I say this game is like super dense and super complicated, I don't necessarily mean that it's like more difficult to learn. Actually, I think the tool tipping and the overall like way in which this game educates you is fantastic. When I talk about density, I mean the degree of procedural generation in this game and the degree of potential outcomes that are in front of you with every single run is far more vast than like a game like Slay the Spire. I think we should talk a little bit more about how this game is set up, because then we can get into like some of the mechanics. So we've already talked about deck builders. I don't think we necessarily need to go into the deck building mechanic anymore, but the thing that like sets this game up that I think is different and unique is, first of all, you're playing a monster train that is burning its way through hell. Hell has been frozen over by the angels of heaven, and you and your monster train are fighting back. The first sentence in this game is "Go to hell," which I love. That's so funny. And it is you have this the map that's in front of you is. You have 4 floors. The top floor is your pyre, and it has health. At the end of the day, that is the deciding factor. If your pyre gets reduced to 0, game over. And then there are 3 floors below it. Each floor has a certain amount of like space for you to place your monsters, your heroes. And enemies, other than a few situations, will always come in at the bottom floor. On each turn, you have a deck of cards in front of you and a certain action pool, just like all of these games. You'll have three actions. Most cards cost 1, some cost 2, some cost 3, some even cost more. You play as many cards as you can, and then you hit go. And this game actually has like full-on little animations where the creatures on each floor fight each other, and they like go back and forth, and you see them hit each other. And the fight starts at the top floor and works its way down. All of the monsters that survive from each floor move up to the next floor. So it has a oh my god, what's tower defense. It has a tower defense element to it, which I love. I think that's I think one of the big inventions of this game is bringing in tower defense into roguelike deck building, which
which is such a cool combo. And specifically, like what I was reminded of most there, it's like it's not like the sort of freeform tower defense. It's most like Plants vs. Zombies, with the lanes. Yeah. It's very sort of like lane based, like that game is, and you're kind of placing your little crowd of monsters on one side. Lanes full of little angel monsters are coming from the other side, and they fight. And the fights are also very deterministic. That was another thing that I was sort of surprised about here. There's I think almost no randomness here, and you can see in advance before the fight happens, like what the outcome is going to be. You get to see the fight play out, but it's not like you're biting your nails watching them fight. You kind of know what's going to happen beforehand because it'll show you like how many points they have, how much damage they're going to do, if someone's going to die, that kind of thing.
It's and that's another way where this game is accessible. You have full information. You know exactly what they're going to do, and they always go first, which is a key element. So you always know the monsters the angels are going to go first, and then your monsters go second. And then if you are, besides placing monsters, which this is like standard D&D. The cards even look like D&D, right? It's like big image.
Yeah, we need to talk about the art as well, by the way.
And then they have it has an attack and it has a defense, and you're trying to kill all of the angels before they get up and destroy your pyre. And one of the other elements of like complexity that I keep talking about, like the density, most roguelike deck builders, you're kind of managing like one thing in front of you, whether it's a like invisible pool of resources that you have and expend in that turn, or in some deck building games and video games, you have like a physical or character representation in front of you. You're normally dealing with like kind of one thing in front of you. This, you are managing 3 floors. And so the game really comes down to creating these like micro ecosystems where each floor is supporting itself. You might have a creature that when it gets hit, it applies damage bonuses to everyone on its floor. So you might put that one in front and then put behind it a monster that has maybe low health, but can attack multiple times. And so you have your like tank in the front who is taking most of the damage. Every time he gets hit, it's making your high damage guy stronger. And then on the second floor, you might have a guy that has like spikes and high health, and someone behind him who boosts spell attack damage, right? And you create these, much like a tower defense game, you're creating this system that ultimately you're hoping to wear down the enemies before they reach the pyre. And it's really, really satisfying. And there's usually about 7 or 8 turns. And then every third floor, there's a boss, which is they're going to come in and they're going to go until they either die or destroy your pyre. And ultimately, there's only 8 fights, 9 if you're playing with the DLC. So you are really ramping up for like very few actual fights. And I think that's another part about this game. Shane, you said it, that like minimizes the complexity, even though the game is actually complex. You're not fighting like 30 different times. You're really putting your deck to test only 8 times, and usually the first few rounds, the first 3-4 fights you're probably not going to die on those ones. Most of the time, if you die, it's going to be the back half of the game. And so, I mean, I could keep talking, but like they layer all of this on and on. There's different starting cards, there's secondary cards. There's so many different iterations of what those rounds might look like.
Yeah, a couple of things about the way that works. We mentioned that there's these different clans. You start with sort of 2 clans unlocked, and then you do various things throughout the first, several runs to unlock the rest. Because I am not a god of these sorts of games like Nate, who I believe has unlocked all of the clans and played with all of them to some degree. I have played with the first 3. But they're all very unique, and they all kind of have a gimmick that makes sense. But even within the clans, there's different potential play styles. So, for example, each clan has 2 different heroes, or is that what it calls them? I forget. Like
champions.
Champions, yeah, that you can play as, and you can customize your champion in different ways. Your champion is an important unit, but not even necessarily vital to your strategy, depending on what you're doing. So you can have a champion that is like, has a special ability and build your whole gameplay around it, or it might just not be that important to your gameplay plan. Happened to me quite a few times.
One of my favorite champions later that you can get. There's a whole deck that's about playing cards that are called morsels, and all they do is they get eaten by who's ever in the front of the train. And there's a whole champion that all it does is it can be eaten multiple times. And it's so funny. It doesn't do anything other than get eaten a lot. And this game has some really inventive mechanics. I mean, I think there's 8 total decks, and each one of them feel very much like their own play style. And then you pair it with a secondary one, and
that's really unique here, is that like you get to choose your clan is what they call these, and they're like a pool of cards plus a champion. But you also can pick the secondary, like backup clan, and that means it kind of reminds me of like playing like a blue-white deck or whatever in Magic.
Bing.
Oh shit! I did it. It was me this time. Oh no!
Auga.
I'm glad it was you and not me, but I will say that is one of the kind of inventive things that was built in to Magic from the very beginning, is the idea of factions, right?
Oh no, he set him off.
And Magic started off with those 5 factions for the 5 different colors. In later years, they were able to really define multicolor combinations as factions. And so this is one of those things where this kind of game, if you are into Magic, you will almost never see something in a game like this that truly surprises you, because for practically 30 years they've been trying to desperately wring every ounce of possible synergy out of Magic. But the one thing
I thought you were going to say money. Sorry, go ahead.
That too. The one thing that this does that I've never really seen certainly in Magic is that positional lane-based combat element. In most of this kind of game, there is a enemy, and your goal is to just deal damage to that enemy through spells and creatures. But in this, the ability to set up those little multiple synergistic units on each floor, that's really, really cool. I have never seen that before. And it would be something that you could not really easily port back to something like Magic, where you need to be able to fit everything onto a single, 3-inch card.
Yeah, and here each battle consists of multiple waves usually, or I think all of them do. So that's also, I think, kind of unique here. It's and that's really good, because it gives you a lot of cool possibilities for abilities that happen when you kill enemies, or abilities that happen when you cast spells or what have you, that you may want to, having a bunch of kind of mobs show up before the boss or before the main big meaty part of the fight means that you can have these strategies that revolve around doing a lot of little things first and then building up to something. And you get to do that every time you have one of these battles.
Yeah.
Set this machine in motion each time.
One thing I'm not crazy into in this, I mean, if I can throw a critique out there, is that And maybe this is me bringing some of my card game baggage to this game, but this is a game where there are lots and lots of health bars, right? I tend to not totally love babysitting my little demons to see what their level of like hearts are. And in this game, the sheer number of different, like one unit could have regeneration, armor, and a health bar, and all those numbers to some extent matter, and then can be affected by different things. And then on top of that, you have every other unit, sometimes like a dozen on screen at once. And on top of that, the only health bar that really matters, which is the health of your pyre. So
yeah,
it's kind of a stylistic thing.
That didn't really bother me that much, but that's part of what that like density that I was talking about, especially in the later game when like your deck really needs to be optimized to get through some of the challenge levels. You end up with like a wall of information that I think is provided to you pretty effectively. That what Raygan said, like you're always going to see what the end state is. Like, so if your guy has regeneration, you'll know at the end of this round, they're actually going to end up +5 or whatever. But you have to like every floor, you might have 4 or 5 things going on there. The max you can have is 7 units on a floor. And so I've had runs where I end up with like 21 things on the board, and like the just time it takes to read that board and get through it is pretty intense. And that was actually, we were talking in the Discord about like, I like a lot of these games. They're good podcast games for me. That's how I ended up playing like so many hours of Slay the Spire. Besides the fact that I love that game, like what I got really just comfortable doing was just like late at night, put on a podcast and play some Slay the Spire. And I found that I could like do those things at the same time. I could not do that with this game. I think for the same reason you're talking about here, Shane, is just the like sheer amount of analysis you have to do on every round. Now they balance that because you're only doing 8 total fights, but some of these get so complicated that you're like you've only got, 5 cards in front of you and you can only play 3 of them, but there's 20 of your guys up there, 14 of the demons, and you have to play it exactly right. I really, really like that, but it can get dense.
Yeah, I can see that. It's I appreciated that, at least, for me, when I was, and I didn't get as far into this as you did, I found it was pretty forgiving for me if I was like, listening to a podcast or even, trying to get a little work done and playing this on a second monitor. But I bet that if I got into those more advanced levels, like I was still sort of playing through, unlocking the initial clans. And, if you're on that level, this game can definitely be approached that way. But yeah, if you get into the more advanced stuff like Nate did, for sure, it's going to require more attention and focus.
And I should note, of course, these higher challenge ratings are all optional. You don't have to turn on any of this. So
speaking of like of optional challenge, one of the things I really, really liked about this is the little. So like many games like this have the sort of Supergiant style approach to like opting into additional difficulty, but usually it's something where you toggle it for a whole run. But here on a per fight basis, there will be these little optional extra challenge difficulties that you can flip on and off, and you can turn those on a per run basis, like on the or not on a per fight basis. On the like beginning screen at the beginning of a fight, there'll be a little panel that says something like enemies will come in with level 3 spikes if you turn this switch on, but the reward is you get an extra 75 gold at the end of the fight or something like that. And you can toggle it on a per fight basis. So I might turn it on for some of those early ones when I'm like really cruising through, and then turn them off when I'm, when it's serious time. I love that. I love being able to toggle that within a run because, what if I have a really bad run, or what if I really want to prioritize money, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and you can also start
they give you good info on that. They tell you specifically what the reward is going to be and what the risk is. and they do it before you start the game. I really like that as well.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll run into one of those because generally it's like optimal to turn those things on, right? But like you'll run into one of them where, like you said, all your enemies have spikes now. That means that when you hit them, you take like 4 damage. And some decks are built where your entire thing is a lot of low health, high hitting monsters. You do not want spikes on because they're just going to kill themselves on the enemies. When normally you're doing other things to avoid them getting hit, but you can't avoid them hitting the enemies. So it adds this level of like, is this extra challenge the right one for my deck or not? Which I think is really cool. I thought that was a really cool innovation and allows you to not only take on extra challenge, but also you get direct rewards for it, which makes you even better for the next time. So I have one other thought on like why this game feels more approachable and more maybe openly fun than some of the other games that we've talked about. Besides Slay the Spire, even one of my other favorite roguelikes, which you can ring your little bell here, but I feel like I haven't talked about this game for a while. But FTL.
I really need to get a soundboard here.
Yeah, I know. Hey, you know what? You're going to bring up golf. Golf is the original roguelike. Most of those games, most roguelikes are a war of attrition. You are struggling through it. There's moments of victory, but for the most part, it's all about resource management and like just getting through it, trying to get that avalanche rolling where you think you're going to be able to beat the final boss. Every once in a while you may steamroll it, but for the most part, those games feel like it's a struggle end to end. Monster Train, I think for a lot of different reasons, feels more like power against power. Like your deck is always going to be pretty good, but you're fighting a lot of enemies, and it's more about like arrangement and like just balancing your strength rather than just getting through it. And I think it's a whole mood difference. The game just feels more accepting. Even when you die in this game, it doesn't really feel like it's been like a struggle like it might feel, deep into a Slay the Spire run or an FTL run.
I agree. It's definitely a different vibe. I felt significantly less despair playing this game.
Yeah, and I think that's intentional, and I think that's why this game is was so beloved, even if it hasn't had necessarily the like national or the long standing.
I mean, it did well. I think people, I don't know, like the relative like financial successes of these games or anything. And obviously Slay the Spire has had a longer lead than Monster Train, but I still hear people talking about Monster Train quite a bit. And I mean, it was nominated for a bunch of awards and won some things. Yeah. Just looking at the Wikipedia, it says it was nominated for the best strategy and tactics game in the Game Awards of 2020. And, that's a crowded category. It didn't win, but it was, but it's really an honor just to be nominated.
You know what I think it is? I think it's because there's so few fights. Like most of the other games, you're being chipped away at over and over and over and over until you die. And you kind of know you're going to die like 5 fights before it happens in most of these games. And you're like, oh, maybe something will happen that'll turn the tide. At least my experience so far with Monster Train is that generally you're kind of going and you're going well, and then you just run up into some series of, one of the fights goes horribly wrong, whether your deck wasn't optimized for it or you made a mistake or whatever it is. And then you either die that battle or you're going to die on the next one, and then it's just done. It's not like this sort of slow beat down that you experience in these other games. And I think that's great.
Some of the bosses are really designed to basically punish certain deck styles. And that kind of is one of the things that I haven't really gotten far enough into it to decide if this is a big issue for me. But there are it pays off when you're designing this kind of game to build in some kind of something to counteract the really strong strategies, the really big synergies, because the player is going to be infinitely inventive in combining things. So I don't know. I think
one thing about that is that you can look, and this I think is unique to this game. You can not only like look forward on the map, you can look over the entire map. And from the very beginning, when you start a run, you can look forward and see what version of the final boss you're going to be fighting. There are multiple versions of Seraph, the final boss.
Actually,
and
I realize
assume,
Yeah,
you can scroll down, or it's even just on the screen there, and it'll show you which version you're fighting, and not just a name that you have to like remember, like what is Seraph I forget there's names for them, like the Ponderous or something. Like no, it'll tell you like what version with some like explanatory text about like what this version of Seraph you're going to fight is going to be doing. And so if you are thinking like, oh, I want to do this deck style, and then you look at that list and it's like, oh, it's that Seraph, maybe I'll choose a different deck style this time.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. Also, apparently that wasn't in the game originally. That was like something they patched in after feedback. And that's like, this is a game that did a long early access period and a bunch of meaty free DLC plus one big paid DLC that's come out. I played without the DLC, but with all of the updates. So yeah, they did a lot of TLC on this.
I played the Switch version, so I have like the full complement of everything. And there's a whole element with a optional 9th boss that's even more challenging, which I really enjoyed. I really like this game. I think if I can do my tiny nitpick, and I think this is a design choice, so they did it on purpose, but like once you've selected your two clans, you have a set of starting cards that you're going to get because of the clans you choose. And then they give you 3 random cards from the 2 clans, 3 total cards. So it could be any combination of the 3 from those 2 clans, as far as I can tell. And it's cool because sometimes those are going to be a major part of your starting deck. And so they often dictate like what the entire playstyle is going to be, because these starting 3 cards, you get multiple copies, and they're something like 30 to 50% of your entire deck is this random assortment of cards that was, that you had no selection over. But what can be really annoying is that like sometimes there is
not all the cards are awesome.
Yeah. And there's like inverted like counter synergies where it's like these cards hurt each other or like have no, like you would never select them. And so, I think one of the fun things about this game is or games like this is you have to take what comes your way, right? That's how you get good at these games. You just deal with what's in front of you. But I wish that in this one moment, like give me 5 in front of me and I get to pick 3. Like it's the one time where you have no choice, but it's so influential on the run. It's nice sometimes because it reveals synergies you didn't know, you never would have thought of yourself. But like when they are counter to each other, it almost feels like I don't even want to play this run. And then even if you're getting pretty good at it, like a win can take like over an hour to 2 hours. This is a longer game as far as some of these go. So it's like, do I want to commit like an hour and a half to try to like figure out this sort of shitty starting deck? It's probably not going to work at the higher challenges, and so I just wish you had a little bit of control over that. This is picking nits, if you will, but it stood out to me as like
concede the game at any time.
Yeah, but who wants to do that? Like, a roguelike deck builder where you're like, oh, bad draw, restart. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather just like have a thing that lets me have. It's the one part where you don't have any control, and I think that like it stands out, So
you're a very honorable player, Nate.
Well, I try.
So I do want to talk about one thing about this game that like is the reason that I almost didn't play it, and that is the art style, which like the best way I can describe it is like really Hearthstone-y.
Yes.
May I simply say that it is. I did not think it was possible for a game to make demons dorky like this.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is not a mobile game. We haven't talked platforms really. Like, this is a game that it's on Steam, Windows only. I think. I don't think there's a Mac version of this.
No, it was Windows and it was Windows and Xbox when it launched, and then then Switch like a year and a half later.
Yeah, and it is on Xbox Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, like, this is a no-brainer. You download this free part of your subscription. That's what I did. You can pay extra for the DLC, but you get a lot of game here as part of your Game Pass subscription on either Xbox or PC, which is awesome. But like this, despite this being a console and PC game, this looks mobile AF, right? This like the characters are these sort of like there are animations to them, but they have a little bit of that sort of paper doll movement that feels a little flash gamey. The art style, the illustrations are very like, shiny, goofy demons with the sort of like the Hearthstone like art pass filter over them, right?
To drill down on that aspect of it a little bit, what I think you're calling the Hearthstone style, this is just it's a very common like character concept art style. And it works for this kind of thing because they don't have to, these aren't like fully 3D rendered characters. So you can go from that level of like an initial character concept art. You see that in the design of a lot of stuff. And then what you're kind of seeing there is the Hearthstone style. There's the UI of this game is incredibly Hearthstone. And Hearthstone really leans into the skeuomorphic look of these cards being like having arched like stone doorway frames and shiny droplets of blood representing things like health, and everything having a kind of volumetric glow around it. And all of that is, I mean, it's definitely a really good style for this kind of thing because it reads well on the screen. It just is. I mean, there's a reason that skeuomorphic design isn't that popular in UI outside of games anymore. And it's just because it is kind of corny looking when you apply it to a lot of stuff. So, I don't know. Also, it's really hard to do artistically.
Yeah, I think you're right. Is like it's mostly just like they clearly wanted, this is a systems heavy ass game, and they needed to present a lot of information clearly, and they needed all the characters to be clear, and they wanted to add a little bit of personality to them. And so I can see how they arrived at this visual style. I don't think it markets itself very well. Like I think that the thing that this game does really well is very hard to show in a tweet or in a GIF or in a screenshot on Steam.
Yeah.
And you could show me, I'm literally looking at one of my screenshots right now, and it says across the top, Hearthstone. And that's just, in this case, that's the name of a upgrade that adds 25 health to one of your monsters or whatever. But in this screenshot, if you were to take a look at this and I did not know it was from Monster Train, I would 100% think it was Hearthstone. It is just that similar.
Yeah, and sometimes the floors get so crowded that like, and maybe this is just on the Switch, I don't know, but like they just like layer on top of each other, so it doesn't even, you end up with this like blob of monsters and angels that are incomprehensible from each other. I think like they do some cool stuff, like, the bigger monsters that take up more space are physically bigger on the board, and like, they tend to represent what they kind of will do and whatnot. But yeah, I don't think it's an incredibly visually appealing game. And in fact, like, we already talked about it a little bit at the beginning, but every turn actually like fully plays itself out. If it's if it's an axe guy, he will like whip across the screen and like hit them with their axe and then whip back to their spot. If it's a spellcaster, they'll do like a little thing and then like the damage will hit or like the health will go up or whatever that they do. It's like they're not
of glowy particle effects. Lots of characters that move one cutout arm.
Yeah, exactly. But like, so they'd spend all this time making all these little animations and whatnot, which is cool. But after the second or third time playing this game,
you barely see it.
Well, you can you can play this game at different speeds. There are 4 different speeds where if you put it, it's pretty funny. There's like basic speed, and then the next speed is like 2 little play arrows. The next speed is 3 little play arrows. And then like the maximum speed is just like basically the little gasping emoji face. And when you play it at that speed, it's incomprehensible. It still does all the animations, but it moves at a speed where it's like, why even do it? Just have it like think and have all of the outcomes done. It's almost hilariously fast. And I actually didn't play it at that speed because it was almost like jarring. So I'd play it at like the second or third speed, but you're not really watching it. You already know where it's all gonna go. It told you before you hit end of turn how it's all gonna go. Like I felt like
that Slay the Spire determinism. That was one of the biggest innovations of Slay the Spire is know what the enemy is going to do on their next turn.
Yeah,
and that is a really excellent choice that this carries over, and that I think pretty much every game following it in this genre has tried to imitate.
But I don't need to see my little guy cross the screen and do a one animation smack when there are going to be at the end of the game hundreds of these things because there's so many little fights. That was pretty funny to me. It's like they made it, realized it's not as fun as it like they thought it would be, so they added in the speed up thing, later, and everyone just
realized that and did it.
Yeah. I mean, this game would take so much longer without that feature. I wonder what came first.
There are a lot of games that really benefit by turning off the battle animations.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I guess that's fair. A lot of games have like not interesting, unnecessary battle animations. So
yeah, that's
this
like
one falls right in
JRPGs a lot.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you think this is a better game than Slay the Spire? I'll accept answers from everybody. Is this better?
That's such a hard thing to answer, but my, I don't really like to like straight up like stack rank as much as I can avoid it. That said,
which of your children do you like best?
That said, I do think that I enjoy Slay the Spire more than this game. But I've spent this like an hour now talking about how great this game is. So I think it's awesome. But like there's something about the like simplicity, at least compared to this, of Slay the Spire that I love. And I don't know,
I'm very much reminded of this like web comic where it's like it's sort of a meme of somebody like holding their cake that they've just baked and looking at someone else's and thinking their cake is better than mine. And then there's someone looking at, the person that they're serving these cakes to is like, shit. Yeah. 2 cakes. It doesn't matter which one is better. And I'm sure it'll vary person to person. I would say that I have played neither of these enough to really feel like I can definitively say which one is better, but if I had to choose which one to sit down and play today, part of this might be recency bias, I would definitely choose Monster Train because I felt like I grokked it better than I did Slay the Spire even on my best day. But then again, that's me, right? And I'm not that great at this genre, and so anyway, take that for what it's worth. But I would say like if you like deck building games, it's not so vast of a genre that you can be that choosy, right?
Yeah. I think like, even though there's some obvious influences and some overlapping, like this is an incredibly different game than Slay the Spire,
Mm-hmm.
you
It
know?
is.
And I think like if you like the genre, then you're going to like both of them. I think if you've never played any of them before and you're looking for an entry point into a complex deck building roguelike, this might be a better gateway. And if you can grasp this and understand it and get deep in it, then I think you'll be set up with some good skills that will make you successful at Slay the Spire, and vice versa. Yeah. But like, I can see why this game might be a little more immediately approachable than Slay the Spire.
So, quick wrap up. This was Monster Train. You can find it on Xbox and PC. It's on Steam as well as part of the Xbox Game Pass on both Xbox and PC. So if you're a member of those services, you can download this there. And you can also get the complete edition on the Switch. I believe was looking at the Steam page, and I think it's a $25 game at full price, but it seems to go on. We're at the stage where it's going on sale pretty frequently. So if you haven't bought it by now and you don't have Game Pass, you can probably snap this up on sale if you wait. I think we just missed the Halloween sale, but I know there's holiday sales coming. But yeah, I would recommend this to anybody who likes the genre, and especially if you've got Game Pass, this is a no-brainer. Download it, check it out. You're going to love it. But anybody have any last thoughts before we roll into what's making us happy this week?
No, I play this game. It's tight.
Yeah, it is indeed tight.
I will say, I think if you liked this, you're really going to like Inscription, which we're doing soon.
Yeah, I can't wait. We're really like, in terms of episode planning, I am a little mad that we didn't get Inscription a little sooner, so that we could have made it our Halloween game. It's looking like everything we would have wanted for that. But also the fact that then, we had already planned to do this Monster Train here in the schedule. I really, really want to do Inscription, and I want to do it soon, but I didn't want to bump Monster Train, and I also can't really bump IF Comp. So we're going to be talking about Inscription soon, but we're going to have some IF Comp as a palate cleanser so we don't do 2 deck building roguelikes in a row. But I'm pretty sure these are different enough. Inscription is its own thing in a big way. So looking forward to talking about that pretty soon. So what's making you happy this week? Nate, what's making you happy this week?
Yeah, so I've got 2 things. I'm going to keep them both quick, though. First of all, I speaking of longer games, I haven't played a RPG game. I think the last one I played, at least full on Western style RPG. I think the last one I played was Breath of the Wild, if you even count that in that genre. And obviously Masterpiece, one of my favorite games of all time. I think before that was Skyrim. So I never play these long, grand, sweeping, third person, action games. But I got a PS5 recently, and I've been looking for good games to play on it. I played through Spider-Man. I talked about that already. I got for free Horizon Zero Dawn, so I've started playing that, and it's awesome. I had a lot of options in front of me because I've never played any of these games, and this one just seemed the most appealing, and it's been great. So really excited about that. In 4 years, when I finish it, I will tell I will tell you all about it.
Yeah, just in time for the sequel, which is coming out next year, right? They delayed it into next year.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to get
You're
through
not
it.
to back them.
No, I will be hopefully a third of the way through this game by time that comes out. But I'm loving it. It's awesome. It's a really cool game. Robot dinosaurs. I mean, come on. Anyway, so the other thing
I really liked it. I never finished that one, but I really liked the robot dinosaurs that look like the big tall what do you call those? The big, but they have the big dish for a head.
I just got to one of those for the first time. It's called a tall neck.
Yeah, those things are sick. What a cool design.
Which I think what stood out to me is basically every game, just every open world game now seems to, at least the 2 that I've played, they're how do we do the Assassin's Creed thing where you get them really high up onto something and that unlocks part of the map, right? Breath of the Wild had the towers, and then this game has slow moving, roaming, gigantic dinosaurs, which is
super good way to do it. Like, there's so much more interesting than climbing a tower is climbing a huge fucking dinosaur.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I agree. I was like, that was my first thought, was like, this is the best anyone has done with this trope at this point. So, but the thing I really wanted to talk about is I just got back from a short trip to the West Coast. I went to a wedding in Northern California, but as part of that, I spent a very filled 24-hour or like 20 hours in San Francisco. And one of the things that we did, Raygan, I'm sure you've been here. If you haven't, I'd be very surprised. Molly and I went to the Musee Mechanique.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, it rules.
Yeah.
I love that place. Amazing.
Which is like over by Fisherman's Wharf, like tucked away in the corner of this, like the touristy spot of San Francisco, is this like warehouse of old arcade games. And like warehouse is the best way to describe it, because they are just like crammed in there. And it has, what you'd expect from like old arcade games, which is cool. You've got your old ass pinballs and your Tetrises and all the, Atari Namco stuff from the 80s and all things you'd expect. But it also has, like, I guess, and this was pretty new to me. I guess there was a period of time where a like popular attraction was just like you'd put in change, whatever it costs at the time. They've been retrofitted to be like quarters and stuff now, but I assume they didn't start that way. And it would be just like a little show of little mechanized like dolls doing something. And that would be the whole thing. So in this case, the one that stood out the most to us was 50 cents, put it in, and it was called Execution. And it was
I remember that one.
It was it's called London Execution. And so what you're looking at is like a big old London style, like old mansion. And when you put in the money, the front doors would open and you'd see inside like a hangman's galley, right? And all these little like figurines, like moved up to it. Someone got the noose put around their neck, and then it goes chunk and they fall, and all the little figure, you just hear a little sound effect of like, and then the doors slam shut, and like, that's it. That was what you paid for. And there were all sorts of these, like, there was just like a recreation of a sawmill, and you put in 50 cents and like the little saws get going, a little log rolls down and, gets moved around, and it's like
incredible stuff. And little like old school film viewers where you have to peek in through a thing and see a little peep show for a nickel or whatever. All that stuff, it's great.
I didn't run into any peep shows, but
you missed out, buddy. You missed out.
But I mean, it was truly unique, and also it was funny because like probably 20% of the machines didn't work, and so it's like the warehouse feeling really seemed fitting. Like you'd put the money in and then just nothing would happen. You're like, all right, well, this thing's probably like 50, 60 years old. All right, I guess I'll go to the next one. But it was a ton of fun. It was very unique, very strange. There was all these old baseball arcade games or bar games or whatever that I played and was terrible at. Most of them hardly worked. But if you're ever in San Francisco, like, totally recommend it. It was way better than what the other like museum style things that were around there. So
yeah, it's a great place. It's not like I was expecting more arcade stuff. Like, it's really not focused on arcade.
No, it's not.
It's very focused on the mechanical entertainment stuff from the 1910s and 20s and some. And in that way, it's like really amazing that they're preserved as well as they are in a state where you could just actually just go up and play them, or put a coin in and see what they do. It's really incredible.
There was one that was just a cool lamp.
Pay a quarter to see a cool lamp, boy.
Yeah, right. It was awesome. Yeah, big fan.
Yeah, I love the little like fortune telling machines and things. That stuff's great.
Yeah,
that rules.
We both got our fortunes and read them at the bar later that night. It was great.
Well, speaking of mechanical entertainments on a level, I was just going to briefly say that the thing that's made me most happy this week and through most of October was that so you may remember last year there was a mania, an absolute mania for the Home Depot 12-foot skeleton.
Of course.
So I wanted a Home Depot 12-foot skeleton so bad. But they've been out of stock everywhere, have been unobtainable. But the same company makes an 8-foot version, which is still a goddamn big skeleton. And Best Buy had that this year. And so I got the 8-foot version of the Home Depot 12-foot skeleton. And we loved it. It's really great. It cost me $300. It was worth every penny. Don't tell my wife how much it cost. And so it's 8 feet tall. It's a large plastic skeleton. It stands on a metal stand. You can pose its arms. It has LCD screens in the eyes, so it looks like it has eyeballs that like look around and blink in a very unsettling way. And its jaw is also automated, so it moves along with it. Has a voice box, and it'll say various corny dad jokes about bones, and it will talks and whatnot. And my daughter fell in love with it. She named it Good Big Friend. And
oh my God.
Good Big Friend stood on our yard for all of Halloween and made our house easily the most impressive Halloween display in our little subdivision, which made me happy.
Nice.
So I wanted to recommend to everyone that, it may seem silly to spend a lot of money on a very large skeleton, but it is the gift that keeps on giving. And I'm trying to decide now whether I can get my wife to let me get away with using it for other holidays as well. I'm thinking about putting a Santa suit on Good Big Friend for Christmas. Maybe dressing him up as a turkey here for this month. I haven't taken him down yet. Maybe I can do that. So if you have other suggestions about ways that I can incorporate Good Big Friend into other aspects of our life, let me know.
We have a 4-foot version of the 12-foot Home Depot skeleton that doesn't have any of the mechanical parts, and his name is Jojo. And he's a big hit. And when he's not out front, he often is sitting at my drum set down in the basement, and it's great.
Nice. I mean, if you think about it, all of us have a short version of the Home Depot 12-foot skeleton inside of us.
Yep.
So
that's how I think about it. We all have a wet version of the 12-foot skeleton inside of us.
Mm-hmm. Shane, what's making you happy?
Gross. Well, I don't know if you heard about this, but the Astros are in the World Series. Nate's a big baseball fan here too, so I'm sure Nate, have you been keeping up with the World Series, Nate?
I hope you're not looking at it right now, Shane.
I am. It has been making me happy up until right this minute, where we're down by 6.
We are
6 the last time I looked.
We are recording as the World Series is nearing its end, but I don't mean to.
I always do enjoy watching. The last time we were in the World Series was a few years ago, and there are some people who maybe contest some of the results, but I think we had a really good World Series last time. And this time around,
we're just gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna leave it alone.
I'm just gonna walk right past that trash can. But the thing that I'm really enjoying about it this time is you know that I am very much a regular down in my local games cafe, Coral Sword. Shout out to Sword. Yeah,
play the sound again.
What's the sound of? Can you play a conch shell like a?
Just do the sound of a baseball bat hitting a trash can. Down at Coral, the person who started the shop is Hunter Pence, and he has been in town for the series, and so he's been hanging out down at Coral. And this is not the first time I've gotten a chance to hang around and play cards with Hunter, but it's always a real blast. And I've just been doing like two very core geek things at the same time. I've had 3 days in a row, the first 3 games, where I was playing Magic and watching the World Series at the same time. So that was an absolute blast.
Probably not everyone is aware who that is. So he is former All-Star, played for the Astros, won a World Series, a couple, I believe. Big.
Yeah, I think he won 2 with the Giants.
Big famous baseball player, which is awesome that you're hanging out with him at a Magic the Gathering place,
He's an absolutely incredible gamer. I have still never beaten him at anything, so that is one of my long-term goals. I did run D&D for him one time. That was a real absolute blast. He and his wife and his brother-in-law were in that.
I'm going to get in that game, Shane. I'm coming down next time you do.
Well, I talked to him about running another game. If I do one online, maybe I'll get you in there.
You know it. I'll quit my job to come down.
Awesome.
Pretty sweet.
Well, listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. We are glad you were here. You can find us on the internet at www.theshortgame.net, where you can find all of our back episodes. I mention this every now and then because a lot of folks don't seem to know. Our CMS really only lets us have the most recent 150-ish, I think, episodes available in your podcast app, but this show has been going much longer than that. We're closing in on episode 300 here.
Wow.
Pretty
Look at
soon.
us go.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to older episodes, or if you're curious if we might have covered a game, you can go to theshortgame.net. An easiest thing to do is you go to our show notes page, which gives you a page that sort of has a big scrollable blog style view of all of our page, and there's a search box there. So if you are curious, did they cover X or Y game back when it came out, or at some point over the last, what is it now, 7 years? You can do a search there, and it'll search through all of our show notes over all of our history. And if there are episodes from our back catalog that are not available in your podcast app, you can listen to them there. Of course, you can pull that up on your mobile browser or whatever, and it works just fine, I promise. And I am investigating new CMS solutions to potentially make that problem less of a problem. But that is our current situation. 150 most recent episodes. That's what y'all mostly listen to anyway. But the whole history is there. And let's see. You can also find us on Twitter at _shortgame. You can find us on Patreon. The most important way to support the show is to go to patreon.com/theshortgame. And you can support us for any amount you'd like. We love money. But if you want to send us even just $1 a month, the minuscule amount, you won't even notice it. Then you immediately get access to our Discord, which is where we chat about the show. And if you support us at the $5 level, then I will send you some stickers. And you'll love that.
What a deal, Raygan.
Yes, I know.
They're nice stickers.
They're very nice.
I made them myself by ordering them online.
If you subscribe at $10, Raygan will send you his Nintendo Switch that has a sticker on it.
No.
All right.
So let's see. Twitter _shortgame. Me on Twitter. You can find me at Raygan K. That's RayGanK. Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
On Twitter at 8BitShane.
And once again, listeners, thank you so much for... and we'll be back next week, most likely with more IF Comp to close out the year's competition. And if you have suggestions for things that we must cover before the end of the year, because we're rolling into GOTY season here pretty soon, let us know. Good time to tell us what we've been fools to overlook, because we only have so long to correct our ways. So let us know before the end of the year, before our episodes get fully planned. So thanks for all of the suggestions that have been coming in through our Discord and Twitter over the last few weeks. Thank you, guys. And once again, thank you for listening to The Short Game.